Someone you love is going to die. You know this. You don't think about it, not really, not in the way that changes how you eat breakfast or how you say goodbye at the door. But the real answer to what happens after is far stranger than you've been told. Your ancestors thought about it constantly. Death wasn't a possibility to them, it was a neighbor. It sat at the edge of every fire, every hunt, every birth. And what they did with that fact built the emotional architecture you're still living inside today. Start 78,000 years ago, on the coast of what is now Kenya. A child, no more than 3 years old, is buried in a shallow pit. Its body is curled on its side, knees drawn to chest, the way a body curls in sleep. Something soft was placed under its head, a pillow, for a child who could not know it was there. This is Panga Yasaidi, and the burial is one of the oldest of its kind ever found in Africa. Researchers led by Maria Martinón Torres describe the careful positioning as evidence of intentional, ritualized burial, not just disposal. Someone dug that hole. Someone shaped that pillow. Someone stayed. That's the part that should stop you. Not the death, the staying.
Because here's the strange truth. Grief as you experience it is not universal in the animal kingdom. Most creatures walk away from their dead within minutes. A gazelle does not return to the place its mother fell. But elephants do, chimpanzees do, and humans, more than any other species on Earth, build entire structures around not letting go. Why? Anthropologists have a theory, and it's not the one you'd expect. It's not really about the dead person at all. It's about the living ones who watched. Your brain evolved in small groups, 50 people, 100 maybe. In a group that size, every death was personal. Every death removed someone who helped you eat, helped you survive winter, helped you fight off a predator or a rival band. A death wasn't just sad, it was a structural threat to the whole group's survival. So evolution did something clever. It made losing someone hurt, physically hurt. Neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger ran a now famous study showing that social pain and physical pain share the same neural real estate, the same region of your brain called the anterior cingulate cortex. When you say heartbreak feels like a punch to the chest, you are not being poetic. You are being accurate. That pain served a purpose. It made you remember. It made you protect the people still standing next to you because you now understood in your bones exactly what could be taken. Grief is not a bug in the human operating system. It's a feature installed by natural selection to keep the group alive. But knowing the mechanism doesn't explain the ritual. Pain alone doesn't build a burial. Pain alone doesn't carve a pillow out of stone. Something else was happening. Go back further, not to modern humans, to the Neanderthals. At Shanidar Cave in northern Iraq, archaeologists uncovered a cluster of Neanderthal burials dating back 60,000 years. One skeleton, known as Shanidar 4, was found with unusually high concentrations of ancient pollen surrounding the body. For decades, researchers speculated this meant flowers had been laid across the grave, a funeral bouquet 60,000 years old. Later analysis complicated that story. Some of the pollen may have come from burrowing insects, not human hands. Science course-corrected, the way it should. But even the more conservative interpretation still stands, and it's arguably more remarkable. Shanidar 4 was buried deliberately, in a fetal position, in a spot the group returned to again and again over generations. A cave isn't just a shelter. It became a place you came back to, a place with meaning attached to it, separate from any practical use. That is one of the oldest ingredients of what you would now call sacred ground. Here's where it gets stranger, and closer to you. Paleoanthropologist Paul Pettit has spent decades studying the archaeology of death, and his research points to something unsettling. The earliest burials weren't primarily about honoring the dead. They were about controlling the living's relationship to death itself. A body left in the open invites scavengers, disease, and a kind of psychological horror that can unravel a small group fast. Burial contained the threat. It gave the living a boundary. A ritual said, "This is handled. You can go on." That's a hard thing to sit with. The origins of funeral ritual may have been less about love and more about damage control for the people still breathing. And yet, somewhere along the way, containment became something more. The pillow under the child's head at Panga Yasaidi wasn't strictly necessary for damage control. Neither were the ochre pigments found smeared across countless ancient burials, staining bones red thousands of years after the flesh was gone. Red ochre shows up in burial sites across Europe, Africa, and Asia, spanning tens of thousands of years and dozens of unrelated cultures. Nobody agrees on exactly what it meant, but its presence, over and over in graves separated by continents and millennia, tells you something. Humans were reaching for a shared language before language itself could carry the weight. They needed to say something, and they didn't yet have the words, so they used color instead.
You still do this. Think about it. A black armband, a white lily, a candle lit in a dark room. You are still speaking in the vocabulary your ancestors invented before they had grammar for grief. Now here's the twist that reframes everything you've just heard. You might assume that because ancient humans face death so much more often than you do, they felt it less, hardened by repetition, numbed by exposure. The opposite appears to be true. Bioarchaeologist Christopher Nusel, who has studied skeletal remains from ritual burial sites across Europe, has argued that the elaborateness of a burial often scales with the disruption a death caused to the group, not the individual's status alone. A young mother, a skilled hunter, a child who might have grown into someone essential. These deaths, the ones that tore the biggest hole in the social fabric, tend to show the most ritual investment. More grave goods, more care, more time spent by hands that had better things to do than dig. Which means the group that buried that 3-year-old at Panga Ya Saidi wasn't performing grief out of obligation. They were responding to an absence they could already feel widening. Sit with that for a second. 78.
That continuity is the real discovery here. Not the pollen, not the ochre, not even the bones. It's the fact that the shape of human grief has not changed in essential form for over 70,000 years. You still curl the body. You still return to the place. You still mark it with color, with objects, with ritual you can't fully explain, but somehow can't skip. Modern grief researchers, including psychiatrist Colin Murray Parks, whose foundational work in the 1970s reshaped how clinicians understand mourning, describe grief not as a single event, but as a process of reorganizing your entire model of the world around a person's absence. That is exactly what a burial ritual does, physically and socially, for an entire group. It's a slow, deliberate act of teaching everyone present that the world has changed shape. And here is how to keep walking through it anyway. That's what the pit at Panga Ya Saidi really was. Not a hole in the ground. A lesson in how to keep living. So the next time you find yourself standing at a funeral, feeling that strange mix of numbness and unbearable specificity, that oddly formal choreography of flowers and dark clothing and quiet voices, understand what you're actually part of. You are performing one of the oldest continuous behaviors in the human story. Older than farming, older than cities, older quite possibly than language itself.
Your ancestors didn't invent grief because they were sad. They engineered it generation after generation without ever meaning to, because a group that mourned together survived together. The ache you feel when you lose someone isn't a flaw in your design. It's proof the design worked exactly as intended for 78,000 years and counting.